I want you to take a second right now and just visualize a scenario for me. Picture yourself sitting down at your kitchen table.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And resting on the plate right in front of you is a standard plastic bank card, like, your everyday credit card. Just a normal piece of plastic.
Right.
Now, imagine taking a pair of heavy-duty scissors and just cutting that card into these microscopic shards. And then you grab a large glass of water and you just swallow all of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a really visceral image. It's almost physically uncomfortable to even picture doing that.
It really is. It sounds like a horror movie or, I don't know, some terrible futuristic punishment. But according to the research we are digging into today, that is effectively the involuntary dietary supplement that you are actively taking right now,
Oh, okay.
completely without your
Yeah,
consent.
whole credit card's worth.
Exactly. A whole credit card's worth of plastic, week in, week out, is actively entering your body. And honestly, the terrifying part. The scientific community has officially moved past, warning us about this as some abstract future threat. They're now actively tracking it inside our veins. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're exploring how plastic pollution has officially crossed the boundary from an external ecological crisis.
Like a problem for the oceans or the soil.
Right, exactly, to an internal anatomical reality.
Which is just a profound paradigm shift. I mean,
Yeah.
for decades, environmentalism has been framed around what is happening to the Earth out there. But now we're looking at hard biological evidence of what is happening inside human beings.
Exactly. And, to understand how we got here, why we feel so paralyzed to stop it, we're pulling from two core sources today.
Right.
The primary framework for our discussion is this really highly compelling June 2026 essay by John Novick Jr. as part of his America Actually series. And he gave it this incredible gauntlet-throwing title, "We have plastics in our bloodstream. Shouldn't we do something about that?"
It's a great title. Very direct.
Very. And we are pairing his profound societal reflections with the biological catalyst for his essay, which is a breakthrough March 2026 study from Ray University in Amsterdam.
Oh.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Before we spend our time on Novick's deep observations about how society is reacting, we need to quickly understand the mechanics of this invasion. Like, how is this invisible dust bypassing human biology, and where on earth is it coming from?
Well, let's start with the Ray University study, because that's really the biological breach that Novick is reacting to. Historically, the human body's mucosal linings and digestive tracts, they were thought to be relatively impenetrable to this sort of synthetic material.
Because our biological barriers are usually pretty formidable.
Exactly. But the researchers in Amsterdam, they didn't just look at cadavers or isolated tissue in a petri dish. They took actual blood samples from 22 healthy, everyday, anonymous adults. And they found synthetic polymers actively circulating in their bloodstream. I mean, we're talking about materials like PET, which is the exact same plastic making up that crinkly water bottle sitting on your desk right now.
Guilty as charged, yeah.
Right, and polystyrene, which, you'd recognize from standard takeout food packaging.
Which just instinctively feels impossible to me. The human body has all these robust, highly evolved filters, but it really comes down to the sheer scale of the degradation, right? Because we've all heard the term microplastics, but Novick and these researchers are talking about nanoplastics.
Right, nanoplastics.
We're talking about fragments measured in billionths of a meter.
Mm.
And the way they get into our blood is fascinating. Because I always used to picture our lungs or our intestines like a biological coffee filter.
Oh, yeah, that's a really common way to visualize it.
Right. Like I just assumed these tiny particles were just sort of passively slipping through the microscopic holes of the paper.
Yeah, that's a very common misconception. But a passive coffee filter really doesn't accurately describe the biology at play here. The actual biological mechanism is called endocytosis.
Endocytosis.
Right. It's not a passive slipping through at all. It is an active cellular process.
Right. The coffee filter analogy is just entirely flawed. Endocytosis is actually much more like a microscopic Pac-Man.
Yes, exactly.
Our bodily filters are functioning exactly as millions of years of evolution designed them to. The cell membranes are intact, but the plastic has been ground down so infinitesimally small that when it floats through our system, it naturally gets coated in our own bodily fluids and proteins.
Which is the ultimate disguise.
It is. So when this tiny protein-coated plastic fragment bumps into your intestinal wall, the cell's security guards get completely confused. They don't recognize it as a toxic petroleum-based invader. They literally think it's nutrients.
Right, so the cell membrane actively folds inward.
Yep. It wraps its arms around the plastic particle, swallows it like Pac-Man, and then shuttles it right across the barrier directly into your circulatory system.
The biology is functioning perfectly. It has just been completely hacked by the size of the material. And, this reality, the fact that our cells are actively pulling synthetic polymers into our blood, it makes the public communication around this issue so frustrating.
Oh, absolutely. And this is exactly where I have to push back on how some of the media is handling it, and Novick points this out perfectly in his piece. In his article, he criticizes this cable news researcher who went on air and described this biological breach as something that merely warrants investigation.
Yeah, that phrasing is a bit soft.
It's infuriating. I mean, I understand that scientists need rigorous longitudinal data.
Mhm.
I know they want to avoid inciting a mass panic, but warrants investigation is such a clinically detached, almost insulting way to frame it.
It really minimizes what's happening.
It's like sitting in a car with a violently rattling engine, smoke pouring out from under the hood, and saying, well, this warrants a look. We aren't talking about a statistical anomaly here. We are talking about a fundamentally universal alteration of the human biological baseline.
It fundamentally reshapes what is flowing through human veins. I mean,
Yeah.
it just does. And once we accept that horrifying reality, we really have to trace it backward.
Right. Where's this coming from?
Exactly. Where is this invisible dust originating? Because nobody is out there chewing on plastic lawn chairs, right? It originates almost entirely from single-use conveniences. Flimsy grocery bags, sandwich wrappers, the protective film on a new electronic device, things we use for 10 minutes and then discard.
Right. Good.
Because these are synthetic carbon polymers created from petroleum, they do not rot. Bacteria cannot digest them. Instead, when they enter the environment, they suffer from two relentless physical processes: UV degradation and mechanical friction.
Meaning, basically, the sun and the weather are essentially weaponizing our trash. The ultraviolet radiation from the sun just violently bakes the plastic. It attacks the polymer bonds at a chemical level
Yes.
and makes the material incredibly brittle.
Yeah.
And then the wind, the crashing ocean waves, or just the physical friction of shifting soil, it just shatters it. It grinds it down smaller and smaller until it reaches that invisible nanoscale dust that our cells mistake for food.
Which naturally brings us to the great illusion we've all been sold to make us feel better about all of this.
Ah, the blue recycling bin.
The blue bin. It's the psychological safety net for the modern consumer. But the Environmental Protection Agency statistics lay out the reality pretty brutally. If you look at paper and cardboard, they are recycled in the United States at roughly 66%. Glass sits at about 27%.
Which, those numbers aren't perfect, but they show a functional working system of material recovery.
Right, there is a system there. Plastic, however, sits at a dismal 8% success rate.
Wow, 8%.
Which means it has a 92% failure rate.
I need to stop right there and clarify this, because 92% is a staggering number for a system we all participate in literally every week. When I diligently take a plastic peanut butter jar and I scrape out the remnants, wash it out with hot water, peel the paper label off, and sort it into my municipal bin, is that 92% failure rate just a categorization trick? Or is the physical infrastructure genuinely broken?
It is not a trick of the numbers. I mean, the infrastructure is genuinely broken because of, a strict thermodynamic reality.
Like a thermodynamic.
Yeah. Think about trying to mix oil and water. You can shake the bottle all you want, but they inherently repel each other and separate. Plastic recycling faces a very similar molecular impossibility. Single-use plastics are engineered from thousands of entirely different, highly specific, and fundamentally incompatible chemical polymers.
Oh, I see.
You physically cannot take a peat and water bottle, melt it down on the same vat as a low-density polyethylene grocery bag, and expect to get a usable material.
Because their melting points and their molecular structures are completely different.
Precisely. If you try to melt them together, they repel each other at the molecular level. The resulting material has zero structural integrity. It's brittle, it's weak, and completely useless for manufacturing. Perfect recycling is chemically impossible on a mass municipal scale because we just mix everything together in one bin.
Right.
And the physical endpoint of that 92% failure rate isn't a neat, organized landfill. It's places like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Which is now twice the size of Texas, right?
Yeah.
Just churning out there in the ocean.
Twice the size of Texas, and acting as a massive industrial-scale nanoplastic factory. It just sits under the blazing sun, absorbing UV light, while the friction of the ocean waves relentlessly grinds millions of tons of unrecyclable waste into the very dust that eventually slips through your biological Pac-Man cells.
Okay, so the national and global infrastructure is effectively a 92% failure. The macro recycling system is spectacularly flawed, and our trash is literally being weaponized by the elements.
Yes.
So if the systems above us are failing, the burden naturally falls entirely on everyday local citizens. And this is really the emotional core of John Novick Jr.'s essay. He pivots away from the ocean currents and the Amsterdam blood studies, and he looks at exactly what ordinary people are doing to fight back.
And what he finds in his local community is deeply moving, but also, incredibly tragic. Novick grounds his essay by examining his own workplace. He's an educator, so he walks the reader through the halls of his local school.
Right.
He observes the ticking clocks of the modern convenience lifestyle, the single-use sandwich bags in every student's lunchbox, the plastic liners being pulled out of every classroom trash bin at the end of the day.
But the crucial observation he makes isn't to condemn the school. It's the exact opposite. He points out that this community is genuinely trying their hardest to do the right thing. They aren't ignoring the environment at all.
Not at all.
They have implemented this massive school-wide composting program. They diligently wash and sort their plastics to try and capture that tiny 8% fraction that might actually be recycled. They have digitized their records to print vastly less paper. I mean, they are doing every single thing they've been told to do by environmental campaigns.
Local intent is overwhelmingly present. There is a deep, inherent desire for environmental stewardship within that community.
Definitely. And Novick highlights this one specific detail that just, it really breaks your heart when you read it. Right at the front entrance of the school, there is this beautiful mosaic.
Oh, right, the one from 2010.
Yeah, exactly. It was created back in 2010 by the school's art teacher, Janice Hoovey. I believe he pronounces it Hovey, alongside her students. And the mosaic spells out, respect the earth, love to learn, reach for the sky.
It's a beautiful sentiment.
It is. Those kids spent hours meticulously placing those tiles. They believe in that message. So reading this, I found myself getting almost defensive of Novick's defeatism. If the local willingness is so strong, if Janice Hoovey and her students are putting in the work, and the community inherently desires a clean environment, why does Novick feel so overwhelmingly defeated in his essay? Why can't these localized grassroots actions eventually scale up to fix the problem?
Because Novick arrives at a profoundly painful realization. Their environmental sustainability efforts, the composting, the sorting, the mosaic, they are genuine, they are beautiful, and they are absolutely not nothing.
Right.
But they remain entirely fundamentally insufficient against the physics of the problem. You simply cannot compost your way out of a global nanoplastic dust cloud.
Wow. You can't compost your way out of a dust cloud?
You really can't. The local intent is pure, but it is deeply outmatched by the chemical infiltration. Personal actions, no matter how dedicated, are only scratching the surface. It is a harsh truth, but when there is a nanoparticle factory twice the size of Texas churning in the Pacific, washing out your peanut butter jar is tragically inadequate without sweeping macro-level intervention.
So if the everyday person is deeply willing to adapt, but their actions are just scratching the surface, why is there such profound paralysis at the top?
Yeah.
I mean, if the community wants change, why can't the leaders stop this at the source?
And this is where Novick's essay shifts into a brilliant sociological diagnosis. He looks at the American systemic gridlock, and he carefully breaks this paralysis down into 4 distinct pillars.
And it's vital to point out here that Novick maintains a very impartial framing, right? We're not taking sides here.
Absolutely. He isn't endorsing a political faction or blaming a specific administration. He's identifying the structural realities that trap all of us.
So let's look at those structural roadblocks. If local communities are doing their part, the first roadblock preventing leadership from stepping up is corporate economics. And the math here is painfully straightforward. Virgin plastic, meaning brand new plastic made directly from petroleum, is wildly, almost absurdly cheap to produce.
It really is. It's effectively a byproduct of an existing massive global fossil fuel infrastructure.
Right. And on the flip side, researching, developing, testing, and manufacturing biodegradable alternative packaging for global distribution is incredibly expensive. Massive corporations have a legal fiduciary duty to prioritize their bottom line. They simply will not voluntarily abandon a highly lucrative, dirt-cheap status quo to spend billions retooling their supply chains unless there are massive financial incentives or severe governmental penalties.
Which naturally leads us to the second roadblock, because if corporations won't do it voluntarily because of economics, well, we would expect lawmakers to step in. But they don't because of political reality.
Right.
Moving the needle on this issue requires leaders to make profoundly unpopular decisions that would heavily disrupt everyday consumer convenience. I mean, imagine a mayor or a governor attempting to outright ban plastic grocery bags or cheap plastic packaging overnight.
It'd be political suicide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The political courage required to enforce that daily disruption is currently missing. Politicians know that voters might say they want a clean environment, but if you severely inconvenience their morning routine or make their groceries more expensive to package, they will vote you out. So the leaders freeze.
But leaders are supposed to make hard choices when there's an existential threat.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Novik's third point, and this is the one that really struck me: geographical insulation.
Yes, this is a big one.
He argues that the decision makers, both corporate and political, are physically insulated from the immediate crisis. Think about it with this analogy, like the luxury penthouse. Imagine you live in a luxury penthouse at the very top of a towering skyscraper. Down below, the concrete foundation of the building is rotting away, and the basement is slowly filling with toxic floodwater. But up in your penthouse, your plush carpets are completely dry. The climate control is perfect. Your skyline view is breathtaking. It is so incredibly easy to ignore the structural failure beneath your feet when you never actually have to step in the dirty water.
That analogy perfectly captures Novik's point. The elite decision makers are shielded by advanced municipal waste management, high-end water filtration systems, and the geographical privilege of zoning laws.
Right, the trash is zoned away from them.
Exactly. The overflowing landfills, the industrial incinerators, the toxic runoff, it's all intentionally zoned far away from their affluent neighborhoods. Because they do not feel the immediate visceral impact of the trash accumulating on their own streets, they feel no urgency to risk their political or economic capital to solve it.
And because they feel no urgency, they succumb to the final roadblock: temporal disconnect.
Yes. Because leaders are insulated today, they mentally push the plastic crisis into the category of a problem for tomorrow. There is this deeply ingrained, almost magical assumption among leadership that some future technology will eventually be invented.
Right, like a magic wand.
Yeah, some miracle carbon scrubbing machine or blood filtering nanobot that will simply clean the oceans and purify our bodies. This temporal disconnect allows current leaders to entirely avoid making the hard economic and political choices today. They are quite literally passing the buck to the future.
They're passing the buck to the exact same kids who built that 2010 mosaic with Janice Hovey, the ones who asked us to respect the earth.
Precisely. They are relying on the youth to invent a technological miracle rather than taking the difficult responsibility of reforming the supply chain right now.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you synthesize these four structural realities, the dirt-cheap economics of virgin plastic, the political terror of disrupting consumer convenience, the geographical insulation of the luxury penthouse, and the temporal passing of the buck to future generations, you see exactly why John Novick Jr. feels so defeated. You have a massive, impenetrable wall of systemic gridlock, completely stonewalling the genuine, heartfelt willingness of everyday people.
It creates an impossible barrier. The community desperately wants to fix the problem. They are putting in the local effort. But the macro systems actively prevent the necessary sweeping changes from ever taking place.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We need to bring this narrative full circle because the journey of this material is undeniable and it is happening right now. Trees, it went last time. It starts with a flimsy sandwich bag, manufactured because virgin plastic is cheap and corporations refuse to change. You use it for 10 minutes and throw it away because political leaders are too afraid to disrupt your convenience. It goes into a thermodynamically flawed recycling system that has a 92% failure rate.
Right.
It drifts out into the environment, completely ignored by the decision makers in their luxury penthouses. Out there, it undergoes UV degradation, the sun literally snapping its chemical bonds. It shatters via mechanical friction from the wind and waves. It becomes an invisible microscopic dust. It then drifts back into your environment where it is actively swallowed by the biological Pac-Man cells of your lungs or your intestines via endocytosis. And finally, it lands directly and actively in your cardiovascular system.
The pipeline from a cheap corporate commodity to an internal biological trespass is complete.
It is. If you strip away all the EPA statistics we've talked about today, if you put aside the corporate economics, the thermodynamics, and the political gridlock, you are left with the exact mandatory question that John Novick Jr. uses to close his essay. It is the only thing that actually matters at the end of the day. We have plastics in our bloodstream. Shouldn't we do something about that?
And that question, it opens the door to a much larger, staggering implication. I want to leave you with one last profound thought to mull over on your own.
I'm ready.
Humanity has only been mass-producing petroleum-based polymers for roughly 70 years, just a few generations. In the grand scope of human history, that is a mere blip, a fraction of a second. Yet, in that incredibly compressed time frame, we have managed to manufacture a synthetic material that has successfully bypassed millions of years of biological evolutionary defenses.
That is just wow.
So, what does the trajectory of human biological evolution look like 1,000 years from now? When a complex biological system is continuously flooded with a synthetic material, it eventually has to react. Will our bodies eventually adapt and mutate to actually utilize these synthetic carbon chains? Or will they become a permanent, inherited, toxic part of our anatomy that slowly degrades our species? Are we, simply through our desire for daily convenience and cheap packaging, fundamentally forcing ourselves to redefine what it biologically means to be human?
It's an incredible and terrifying thing to think about next time you go to the store. You might not just be holding a plastic bag, you might be holding a permanent piece of our evolutionary future. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking past the surface, and we'll see you next time.